Welcome to the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions. Some of you all know me. My name is Kim Jackson. I'm the executive director, and this is a very special project for us because we want to highlight international careers, and we hope after this recording that we send it far and wide so that our students know the breadth and depth of opportunities in the international space. I'm honored today because the panelists are all special to me in one way or the other. Either I've taught them or I've mentored them, and they're doing phenomenal things in the global community. Also, we have our ISPS fellow, Katie, who is going to be moderating the conversation. And she is a collegiate student at St. Petersburg College, and she is also one of our Rockstar Model UN students. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Because our panelists are in international spaces, outside of our student, who's a current student, Maya, I do not know if they will be able to answer the questions, but we will do our best in the confines of your questions to address them. The program is going to go as follows. I'm going to introduce the very long bios because I think it's important, even though I might mess up and trip over some of their accolades now. And after that, then Katie will we're gonna have a short video by one of the participants who couldn't join us. And then Katie will take over from there and ask questions. All right. With that, I'd first like to introduce Maya Hadley, who is a master's candidate and public service fellow at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. She is concentrating in international economics and finance with a regional focus on Latin America. She's a recent graduate of Howard University and earned her BA in political science in Spanish with honors. She enjoyed domestic politics for a very long time. I can account for that. She served in the executive office of the former mayor of Atlanta and later contributed to policy development under the Biden administration at the Office of National Drug Control Policy. Her academic and professional trajectory shifted during her study abroad experiences in Mexico, Spain, and Colombia. And these experiences deepened her passion. Following graduation, she was given a Fulbright Hays grant to conduct research on post-conflict peace building in Colombia's Pacific region. Her work focuses on the experiences of Afro-Colombian communities, and she is currently in the process of sharing her findings to amplify the voices of those impacted by the conflict. Welcome. Fana Haile Selassie is a U.S. diplomat with the Department of State. She is hailing from Durham, North Carolina. She is Kenyan born and Ethiopian Black American. And her passion for intercultural exchange can be traced back to her familiar background, while her experiences traveling abroad in China, Spain, and Sweden solidified her interest in the U.S. Foreign Service. She is my Spelman sister, and she is also my Eta Kappa sister, which is a member of Delta Sigma Theta from Spelman College. She obtained her Master's of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown University with a concentration in global politics and secured an African Studies. Throughout her tenure with the U.S. Department of State, she has worked in Bangkok, Thailand, the State Department of Africa's Bureau, and currently serves at the U.S. Embassy in Saudi Arabia. All right, heavy hitters. I can't believe these are our wonderful students. Nora and Chris are both SPC students. I want to amplify. Nora is a project manager at ABT Global. Her international development professional with experience in project implementation and grant management is her specialty. She currently works there and manages 2 USAID projects focused on systems strengthening and agribusiness growth. Previously, she contributed to USAID's Balkans projects, led research initiatives at the University of Chicago, and managed grant processes at the United States Institute of Peace. She brings a proven track record in data analysis, stakeholder collaboration, and sustainable development. She received her MA from Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, again, my alma mater, so proud of them, and a BA from the University of South Florida. And finally, Chris, who is not here with us today, but you'll see him shortly on video, is an irregular threats and analysis at C4ADS. He's experienced professional in the field of intelligence with a strong focus on illicit networks as an irregular threats analyst at the Center for Advanced Defense Studies. He delivers actionable insights on conflict-affected states, asset training, and counter-malign actor networks across Africa and the Middle East. Academically, Christopher's works include publications on Arctic defense, intelligence, and climate change. Reflecting on his interdisciplinary approach to global security challenges, He holds an MA in political science from American University and a BA in political science from the University of South Florida. So that was long, but very important, because I want you to know that there are so many different positions within the international space. And I would be remiss if I didn't say in our audience, we have someone from World Affairs Organization who is committed to supporting international careers and expanding that knowledge about what ordinary people can do to contribute to the global space. With that, we'll show our video.
Well, certainly. And first and foremost, I'd like to begin by thanking you, Professor Jackson, for having me on here. It's a really great privilege and honor. I have come a long way since SPC, and that is thanks to the National Model United Nations program, and of course of the leadership of the faculty, including yourself in that program itself. Now, starting over at SPC, I was a little bit unsure of what I wanted to do initially. I went initially on a pre-med route. I wanted to be an ER physician, and I was kind of pressed a little bit by familial pressure and, your folks wanting you to succeed. But I realized that wasn't me. That's not what I was good at. And that really wasn't the path I was meant to go down. Now, I transitioned slowly to a history major because I really enjoyed history and that was my kind of passion. But then I stumbled along the National Model United Nations program. And I learned about the program through Dr. Douglas Rivero and later on through yourself, who talked more about the program in introductory meetings. And I looked at it online. I was like, you know what, this looks very interesting. I'd like to attend some of the information sessions. And from that moment on, I was just enraptured with the space of international relations. It was so fascinating. And I found it to be such a wide field because you can go down so many pathways, diplomacy, economics and econometrics, international relations, business, intelligence, conflict management, and so on and so forth. The field is just so vast, but I think NMUN captures all of that in one nutshell, and it allows students to really test and challenge themselves in very different and unique ways. In areas, for example, I was good at public speaking. I had a knack for speech and debate in high school, and it played to those strengths. But it also played upon my weaknesses. I needed a little bit of mentorship when it came to crafting and writing arguments. And the program really helped in that space through the writing of position papers, through having a kind of peer review system where you could go to the professors, you could go to the peers and look throughout the program, and you could really find individuals who wanted you to succeed. And we all wanted each other to succeed in that program. So that program is really pivotal in kind of carrying me forward. I ended up attending the University of South Florida, graduated with my bachelor's in political science, focused on comparative politics. And I think one core accolade that I could take away from NMUN is it really fed my curiosity, and it helped give me that intellectual curiosity moving forward as a core trait of what I look for in a program or in an area of study.
We have a lot of clips from Chris. He was gracious enough to give me a lot of his time. When we post this, we'll have his full interview up, and we're going to have him play at the end his final comments. But with that, we're going to have Katie speak and ask all of her questions. And again, if you all have questions during this, please feel free to drop them in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Kim. And thank you to our wonderful panelists and everybody joining virtually. So my first question for those that this applies to: how long were you in Model United Nations with SPC, and how did the program help you develop skills necessary for your field?
And that's likely just to Nora.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, thank you, everyone. Thank you for putting this together. And thanks to the staff at SPC. They've been foundational in my professional development. At SPC, I was in Model United Nations for about a year and a half. I participated in 3 conferences. My first conference was an international conference in Ecuador, so in the Galapagos. There, I learned a lot of public speaking. That was one issue for me, or like, should I call it more of a challenge for me of overcoming being in a big, vast room of experts and going and talking about, something that you've researched and really articulating yourself well. I also participated in the New York City conference, and there I was able to actually attend the General Assembly, which was very revolutionary for me because that's something you see in pictures, and as a professional, that's someplace, it's very pivotal in understanding international relations. And then another conference I attended, and my final conference I attended was the one in Washington, D.C. Um, a lot of what I brought with me as I take on my career further and further is that diplomatic aspect of NMUN, right? You're trying to align yourself with these different countries, their challenges, trying to look inward at the challenges or the country that you're representing and the challenges that you're facing. And just that diplomatic aspect of how can you be relatable? How can you really find where you align? And how can you come to a resolution at the end, right? That's the main goal, is trying to come to a resolution.
For me, it was study abroad. So I was really grateful to go to attend a college that encourages and financially supports study abroad for like 80% of the student body. So I knew going in, and it was also required for my major, but I took every opportunity to study abroad during the summers. And get funding from federal government, like such as the Department of State's Gilman Scholarship, to go to China and Spain. And these were really pivotal moments in informing my career aspirations and my long-term desire to work in international relations. Through these experiences, particularly in China, where I was one of the few people of color in the region. I was in Harbin, China at Heilongjiang University. It became very obvious as soon as I touched down that the community there was not used to seeing people that look like me. And I think that it was really one of the many impetuses for me to want to go overseas and show the broad diversity of the United States and the many ways that we show up and represent our country overseas, and show a different type of America that is stereotypically broadcast overseas. And then after that, when I studied abroad in Spain, in Malaga, Spain, I did research with African and migrant communities in that region. And that was when I began to understand the political implications of migration patterns and what it means to be sort of a fish out of water in a foreign country, not just as an American, but for other people with less privilege, passport privilege, as we call it. So if you have the chance, I would encourage you, any student, to study abroad, regardless of your major, regardless of if you're unsure about your career aspirations, because any opportunity overseas can inform your future. I believe that it can inform all fields and experiences.
Yeah, I had similar to what has already been said. I also studied abroad, as you mentioned. And then another thing that I did in high school was a debate program that was funneled through Atlanta, where we went to debate at like a 2-week competition at Harvard, and that was international. And so we got to debate against kids all over Asia and Africa. And so I would say, I mean, I didn't participate in Model UN, but between debate and study abroad, I think that's kind of what fueled my interest in international relations before entering into grad school.
Thank you, guys. My second question is, how has learning to network made it easier for you to create professional development for yourself?
Yeah, I can definitely speak on this a little bit. So I grew up in Florida, so the network there was really foundational for me to pivot into DC. One network is I leveraged my SPC network with Dr. Kim Jackson and had her write my letter of recommendation going into grad school. And through that, it's one catapult after the other. And through that, I was able to go to Johns Hopkins SAIS here in DC and really speak with very high-level experts, diplomats, just career professionals. And that one, if you think about it in like the burnt toast theory, if you guys are familiar, that one small action kind of sparked this elongated network for me within DC and Florida as well.
Yeah, I would say I'm still seeing the benefits of networking given that I'm in grad school. But I mean, so far it's nice the access that we have to, I mean, any industry, any official, any government official, public official that you could think of. And so I would say, I mean, my mom has always told me like it's not always about what you know, it's who you know. And that's so evident in every step of the journey that I've been in. I mean, there are so many instances where obviously, you make sure that you're a qualified applicant, but having people know about your story prior to you entering an interview or know about, some of the work that you've done prior to you applying somewhere is intangible. I mean, there's nothing like it. And so I would just say, I mean, it all comes down to you just being who you are, being open to talking to all different people because networking doesn't always have to be some super formal gala where you're talking to people in suits and, things like that. It can be very informal of you talking to someone in a coffee shop or you're in an Uber and you're talking to your Uber driver and you find out that they've had some crazy career. And so I think, networking isn't as complicated as people make it to be. And every day, here at SICE, I'm learning that. And so I would just say be authentic to who you are. Never be afraid to talk about your interests or what you like to do because you never know what that person has done or who they know, and how that can help you in your career. So it's been very, very helpful. I'm still learning the different ways and strategies to networking in grad school, but so far it's been amazing and such an important part in international relations specifically.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of what Nora and Maya have said, it's not the hard truth of the world is unfortunately that it's often not what you know, but who you know. And I think that's something we've all probably heard at one point or another in our life. I was actually just talking to my mother the other evening and explaining aspects of Saudi culture here. Miss Jackson mentioned in my bio that I'm currently living in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and I've been here for 6 months. And so the glitz and glam of the country and culture has worn off a little bit, and the reality of cultural differences has set in. And one aspect of the culture here is something called Wasta culture. And it's literally just, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Everything, not everything, but a lot of social mobility is achieved through social networking and family name here. And in conversation with my mother, she reminded me gently that that's no different than most US American professional contexts. And so, with that in mind, I don't want any student to be discouraged because you may come from a non-traditional background or for me, I wasn't from DC. And so entering into Georgetown space was quite a culture shock. I felt more comfortable in China than I did at Georgetown because the networking environment, specifically in international relations and in DC in particular, can be quite forced, if you will, and often artificial. So it was extremely uncomfortable for me for quite a while. But I quickly realized that you get much further when you're yourself and you're genuine, and that shows. And people can tell a big difference. So, of course, we all have to play the game to some extent because often access to information is what determines who's in a room. And who you know is what enables you to have access to information. But I would really urge students to keep in mind that there's a way to do it without coming off as artificial or really transactional, which can be quite cringe. And I'm also reminded of a term that we use in diplomatic communities. It's called back channeling. And it's when you have private one-on-one interactions outside of public realms to establish really more intimate connections and relationships with interlocutors. And so I would just urge students to keep this in mind when entering a grad school space or in conversation with professionals that you maybe look up to and want to serve as your mentors, to be intentional with your interactions, but not transactional, if that makes sense.
what was your major at SPC and what path did you take to end up in your current position?
I went to Howard University for undergrad. I majored in political science and I majored in Spanish. Um, the I guess the steps, I mean, Fauna kind of talked about the importance of study abroad, so I won't, dwell too much on that, but it is such an important part of how I started becoming interested in international relations. Like it was mentioned prior, I was super involved in domestic politics from when I was like 15. I thought I wanted to be a politician. I worked at every level of government and ultimately just decided that domestic politics was not for me. And it wasn't until my study abroad experience during my junior year of college where I started to understand the broader international community and how you can become involved in it. And I'm still learning to this day in grad school, all of the different career paths that international relations entails. And so when I graduated from Howard, I had studied abroad in Colombia, and there was an opportunity to apply for a Fulbright Hays grant. Which, if you don't know what Fulbright is, they're kind of like two different parts to it. There's Fulbright Hays and there's Fulbright. One's funded by the Department of State, the other one's funded by the Department of Education, but both are centered around teaching and research. So I decided to pursue the research grant, where I basically you mock up the research that you want to conduct, how you plan on doing it, and then how you plan on sharing the information after you get back from your in-country experience. So I was living in Colombia for 3 months between when I graduated from Howard and when I started grad school at SAIS. I lived in 8 different cities. I was interviewing people every day. There was like a very extensive daily itinerary that was very difficult to maintain, but ultimately has been very, very rewarding in terms of the people that I've met and the connections that I've made in country. After that, I started at SAIS, where I have a concentration in international economics and finance, and then a regional focus in Latin America. So most of my classes are centered around those two focus areas. And yeah, I mean, I'm still figuring out what life will look like for me after grad school. I'm in my second semester so far, and I think I am learning something new every day. I mean, this semester I'm taking my first regional class outside of Latin America, and I'm taking a class on conflicts in the Great Lakes region. So just, I think the exposure that you have when you decide to go to grad school or not, even in your workplace, just the different things that you learn about in a career in international relations is so interesting because it's always changing. And so who knows what I will end up doing in the next few years. But yeah, I would say that's kind of like how I ended up where I am now.
So I obtained my Bachelor's of Arts in International Studies from Spelman, and then my Master of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown. And it was really my concentrations on the side, specifically my certificate in African Studies, that motivated me and gave and maintained my enthusiasm for the degree throughout Georgetown in particular. And so I would strongly advise that you seek out subjects that actually genuinely interest you, that you find yourself wanting to read on further. Pay attention to how you react to the news, what sparks your interest, what motivates you to click on the link and read a little bit further. Is it tech? Is it AI? For me, it's regional. However, I will say with this field in particular, it's hard to have a niche because oftentimes you're responding to the demand of the market, and the market in the sense of like global politics, what's happening. So while I was at Georgetown, and probably still, this is still the case, the hot topic was, of course, China and Ukraine, and responding accordingly, both of which impact the continent of Africa. However, here I am in the Middle East. So maintain flexibility, but also use your postgraduate experiences before full-time employment to really like carve out your niche and pursue your passions and your interests. That sounds cliche, but as someone who will be moving countries and regions every 2 years for the rest of my career, I think that time period is really sacred, and I look back on it and often miss it as one of the few times in my life that I was able to just delve into a topic that I was very passionate about.
Starting SPC, my major was political science, and I come from an interest in regional politics. I'm originally from the Balkans. I'm originally from Kosovo, and I came to America as a war refugee in 1999. So that really influenced my interest, really made me a history buff at a young age. But as I was going through SPC and then starting my professional career, I realized that regional focuses are not only like the thing that you should focus on, but also your thematic focuses. So the skill sets that you want to build upon, because I enjoyed my regional politics in the Balkans. But as I started moving on in my career, I realized that thematically, I really fall into conflict resolution. So coming in and actually developing those skills and understanding, what that takes a lot of negotiations, a lot of project management as well. So understanding how investments go into these countries, who's investing in peace, the humanitarian side of things. So if I were to look back, that would be one skill set that I would really like to develop early on. And I tell people all the time, don't just look at your regional focus. If it's Latin America, if it's Asia, if it's China, move on a little bit and try to see what are your skill sets? What are you good at? Are you good at talking to people, being relatable, being that diplomat? Are you good at the administrative things? Are you good at, being a researcher, a writer? So kind of just finding your niche in that way as well.
Next, if you could go back, is there anything you would have done differently or any opportunity you wish you would have taken?
I can start. I would say, I mean, I already talked about how I started in domestic politics, and I think that kind of, like people have said, you can have a niche, but it's also good to be a generalist. And I think that if I would have started, just not narrowing down my interest so much at such an early age and would have branched out more, I probably would have discovered that there were a lot of things in international relations that I liked and connected to and that aligned with my interest in domestic policy that would have pushed me in that direction earlier and probably would have allowed me to do a lot more in relation to international relations. So like Fauna said, the Gilman Scholarship, there's a lot of different little scholarships and fellowships that are accessible to students who are interested in international relations. And if I would have known that that was my interest, then I would have started doing that my freshman and sophomore year. And so I have peers who, as soon as they touched down on Howard's campus, they knew that international relations was what they wanted to do. And every single semester, they were doing something that aligned with that interest, to then ultimately make them really, really appealing to the workforce or to some of the fellowships like Fauna has that lead you into the State Department. And so I would say just force yourself to kind of look at industries that might be out of your comfort zone or out of what you think you're good at, and read about them. I think Fawn said, just become, to some extent, a generalist where you generally know about a lot of different topics, a lot of different regions. And that way, you can be sure at the end of your 4 years. And even maybe if you're not sure, at least you're aware of what some of the opportunities look like in the career space. I would also say that there are a lot of think tanks in DC who have like free events, free webinars, where they will just literally have some of the most world-renowned people on a Zoom talking about pretty much every industry, issue, region that you could think of. And so I would say I wish when I was still, a freshman, a sophomore, figuring out what region or what industry I wanted to focus on, that I would have took the time to just sit down and listen to people in these spaces talk about the most pressing issues for literally 30 minutes. You could do it while you're on a walk, while you're on the way to somewhere, and that way you can just continue to absorb information from all over and all different viewpoints. And ultimately that will be what, like I think Nora said, what will help you decide what is something that you're interested in and want to pursue further. And sometimes you being able to narrow that down comes from you having a lot of diverse backgrounds and information that, allows you to make that decision. So I would say those are some of the things that I wish I would have done when I was, a little younger. I'm still young though, so I have time, but
Yeah, just picking off of what Maya said, it's definitely so important to really establish your network. I mean, establishing your network at the core is just putting yourself out there and going to these events. Even if you're going alone, sometimes that challenge is helpful because you get to talk to people you wouldn't have talked to initially. And as you're making your way throughout your academic career and then your professional career, stay away from like clicking yourself to only a certain amount of people. Obviously, you're going to have your friends, your close circle, but make sure you're always trying to expand. You're always trying to look for different types of perspectives, interests that people have, because that will really open you up to things that you didn't know you would like initially and different professional opportunities as well.
Just to add to these great points, I think my first regret is specific more so to my master's program because one of the requirements of Georgetown MSFS is that you are proficient in a language before you graduate. And this is one of the number one obstacles to timely graduations for our program. Though I was able to get out by the skin of my teeth, I wish that I had been more consistent with my language acquisition and studying throughout undergraduate. In this field, it is really important to be able or just even open to the idea of learning another language. Yes, most countries, a lot of countries, I shouldn't say most, have the population, a portion of the population has some proficiency in English, but we should question what this assumption, the significance of this assumption, the historical significance of this assumption when we as Americans go into foreign spaces and assume that they will cater to us and what that signals and how that can be problematic. So even just a willingness and openness and attitude to learning another language and fostering that beginning in undergrad, I think is really important. As a foreign service officer with the State Department, we get list of 185 countries at the beginning of our career, and you rank those countries. And you do not get off of probation as an officer until you are proficient in a language. I was very strategic with choosing or ranking Saudi Arabia high on my list because I knew I wanted Arabic and I knew that it would translate or I could use it not just in the Middle East, but also in Northern Africa. So be mindful or open yourselves up to learning another language. Many of you may come from backgrounds and households where another language is already spoken. Use that to your advantage and mention it in every job application and every interview. Finally, I would say somewhat like a paradoxical point to Maya's point, I regret not finding more of a local nexus to my interest in international relations while in Atlanta. Um, Atlanta has a really diverse international community, and I'm sure St. Petersburg has similar traces of that. Every place, it's America, every place is international in some regard, whether or not we realize it. Even the Department of Agriculture has diplomats that fly out from Wisconsin and agro states. So finding if you're unable to find employment or internship or research opportunities with so-called like explicitly international organizations, go back home to your local government, local newspapers, resettlement agencies, and think outside the box because I think that's something that would have served me better and understanding how international relations and foreign policy affects us closer to home than we realize.
What do you think is the most crucial part of your career, and why should it matter to everyday people?
As an African American, I think that something that in the international relations space I've struggled with is not knowing exactly where my people or my community comes from. And regardless, I mean, for the most part, like it says, majority of the people in the spaces that I'm in are either international students or first generation, second generation, and have very strong connections to the region of which they're studying or interested in. And so as someone who I'm very passionate about a lot of different regions, but don't necessarily have that direct lineage to the region or to the people, I think it has been something that I've struggled with. And I think one of the reasons why a lot of descendants from regions that they really don't know or aren't familiar with have a hard time connecting to the space of international relations. And so I hope that, through the work that I'm doing and the way that I'm trying to share, I mean, through, talks like this, sharing the information, the pathway that I took, will hopefully allow more young people who look like me, who come from places that I come from, to understand that there is a space for you in international relations, and you don't have to have a story to the region that you're interested in. I had no background in Spanish. Nobody in my family speaks Spanish. I up and decided to move to Colombia and live amongst Afro-Colombians for 6 months. And I learned so much from them. And it honestly makes you realize how small the world is. And so just how they were able to share their culture and their norms with me, I was able to do that with them. And so hopefully in my career journey and the things that I hope to pursue at the end of the day, regardless of, what industry or what area or what niche, I hope to show, other young people interested in international relations that you too can, learn about something, master it, learn the language, learn the culture, and you will more than likely be welcomed with open arms. And that's what I've been able to see throughout the different regions that I've traveled. Like Fauna also said, language learning is such an important part of you being able to connect with people. And it doesn't even mean you need to become fluent in Russian, but it's like, okay, if you have an interaction with a Russian and they want to, you want to learn how to say a certain word, you ask them. And it's just, at the end of the day, we're all humans. And I think that I hope to kind of break the barriers that I think a lot of people have set for international relations, especially for my community being African Americans. Even at SICE, it is an international school, and I could count on, these two hands, how many people look like me, talk like me, and are from spaces like me. So at the end of the day, I think representation is so, so important. And so I hope that, me sharing my story as much as I can will hopefully, help other people see that as well.
So a bit more about what I'm doing here in Saudi Arabia at the embassy. I'm a foreign service officer with the Department of State. And within the Department of State, there are different cones or tracks that diplomats choose to specialize in for their career. I chose the political cone, which is what we call a reporting specialty. So my career will entail a lot of observing the political dynamics in a host country and reporting back to Washington on those dynamics, as well as, contributing and making policy recommendations to Washington for whatever policy initiatives we have with that host country. Right now, though, every U.S. diplomat has to do at least 1 year of consular work. Like, what is consular work? Consular work is essentially either facilitating legal travel to the US, so immigration, or American citizen services. So our work ranges from responding to babies that are born overseas, and making them acknowledging their US citizenship by distributing passports, to handling crises such as the war in Sudan, when there's Americans on the ground and they need to be evacuated out, or in more unfortunate, morbid circumstances, when an American expat passes away overseas, we facilitate the returning their remains back home to their family. Right now, the impact of my work is reuniting families. So as I mentioned earlier, the United States is extremely, we know it's multicultural and extremely international. It was a country founded by and for immigrants. And that truth still rings, as Nora's story is a testament to that. So my work day to day is more like I compare it really to being a social worker. So I have cases every day, and I review the cases and the nature of an applicant's qualifying conditions to obtain a green card or a visa to be reunited with their family. And it's highly emotional work, and especially in Saudi Arabia, where most of our applicants are coming from conflict-ridden countries such as Yemen, Sudan, Afghanistan. I recently was just deployed to Doha, Qatar for 3 weeks, where the United States has a former military base that we're using to fly in Afghans every week that once worked for the US government. There were 400, before the United States government pulled out of Afghanistan, there were 400 military bases around Afghanistan, and that required a large, vast number of support for our facilities and our personnel. So the support staff, translators, custodians, people that you don't think of, that's lives were put at risk for working and being affiliated with us by connection, that were threatened by the Taliban and continue to be threatened, need a way out of Afghanistan. And so we are facilitating their immigration processing out. So that's what my day-to-day looks like now. And after this tour, every tour is 2 years, depending on the country. Some countries that are deemed more dangerous or are in active conflict zones are shorter. I don't know where I'll go next. I'll get my list soon. So fingers crossed for somewhere that I know I'll go somewhere where I'll continue to learn and be exposed to a new culture.
Yeah, definitely. I think Maya and Fauna touched on this point, but in my career, we require a lot of localization. So I work a lot with US aid, and that's investments that go to other countries to invest in like agriculture, business, humanitarian things. And it's so important to know your stakeholders on the ground, because in order for whatever you're doing in international relations to work properly in the way that it should and be sustainable in the long term, you need to make sure that your collaborators, your stakeholders on the ground agree and they see it as something that's important to them and functional. So just truly having that representation, keeping in mind representation, keeping in mind that, you know, in order for things to work well, you need to be collaborative and making sure that whatever resolution you come to, it comes from multiple perspectives.
One more question, because we want to still play Chris's contribution to this conversation. So if you want to pick, and for those who are participants, Dr. Rivero is very passionate, as am I, about the international space. We are resources, we are easily accessible. Our panelists, I'm sure, will give me an opportunity to say how they wish or do not wish to be contacted. But it is, we value this space of exposing you to this type of program, these types of opportunities, and there will be more to come as we continue to work on our program. So if you do have a question and we haven't addressed it, we will definitely try to do that. We do plan to do a subsequent seminar, which we hope all three and plus Chris will be able to join us in April.
So my last question is, are there organizations, fellowships, or scholarships that the audience members out there can take advantage of to support them on their educational pathway? And to add on to that, is there any other advice you give to undergraduate or other Model UN students to kind of get their foot in the door with international careers?
There are like official lists of opportunities for international relations students. You have your Fulbright, your Peace Corps, your Gilman, your critical language study programs. And those are all, pretty public, pretty well known. I think the underrated opportunities are the ones that come from universities. And so there are, for example, Howard has a Wrangell Summer Enrichment Program where you can, I strongly urge everyone to apply. It's due, I feel like, in 2 weeks. But it essentially is a summer program that happens at Howard. Anyone from any university can apply who's interested in the space of international relations. And you basically get exposure to every industry, every career path from Department of Commerce, Treasury, Department of Defense, Pentagon, White House, literally every space of IR that you could think of. This program kind of packs it into a summer where they're having people from all over DC and the world come and talk to you about the different careers, their paths, how to apply for a federal job position, which is very, very, very like niche, I will say, compared to like your typical job application. And so I would say if you have the time over the next 2 weeks, that's something that I think I wish I really would have done, because you really do in the summer learn about all of the opportunities that are available. Anything from literally consulting, like there are consultants who will come and talk about what the private industry and private sector look like for international relations, which is something that I think I'm starting to look at more now at SICE, and I didn't really know a lot about when I was at Howard. And so again, I would say look into the different universities and the programs that they have, the partnerships that they have, because you never know what you'll find. I would say Georgetown, SICE, American, I mean, pretty much all the schools in DC, I'm not biased, would, have some really cool opportunities for people who are still in undergrad to get involved, and even high school too. I already talked about Fulbright, but if there are any questions that people have specifically about that, I think it's really cool. I'm even considering the Peace Corps, which is also, I think, a really cool network that is underrated and a lot of people don't talk about, but I could also talk about that too if people are interested. But I would say those are a few that came to mind, but
I just want to hop in because I actually did the Wrangle Summer Enrichment Program, which is a precursor or almost a recruitment, if you will, to the Charles B. Wrangle Fellowship, which I am a Wrangle Fellow, and that is how I entered the Foreign Service. It's a full ride. They also fund your master's degree. And Maya summed it up beautifully. We got course credits from Howard courses, econ course, an international history course, and a wide array of contacts throughout the international relations field. Although it was funded by Department of State and they were definitely recruiting for Department of State and the Wrangle Fellowship, I commend them for exposing students to the breadth of opportunities. Now, I do want to acknowledge that as federal funding comes into question in the coming weeks and currently, I would encourage students to seek out alternative opportunities, because a lot of international affairs programs are predominantly funded and run by U.S. federal government. And so I would urge students to think outside the box as we move forward in the coming months and years, the next 4 years, to consider private sector. Maya touched on private universities and opportunities at colleges, and perhaps even programs overseas funded by foreign entities, friendly foreign entities, I would advise, because if you're seeking to get a security clearance, Maya touched on the niche nature of hiring and recruitment for federal jobs, and Nora may be able to speak to this as well. The security clearance process is something that is very, very unique and strenuous. So be mindful of how you're conducting yourself now in your personal time, because if you want to work in international affairs, there's a 50%, more than 50% chance you'll need a security clearance at some point down the line. And your conduct now plays a big role in that.
Yeah, definitely echoing what Maya and Fauna said. Take what you do in your personal life seriously if you want to go into international relations. One, and two, if you are going to be looking to find a job within the U.S. government, definitely it is a very niche process. Look for a mentor. I can help anybody who is looking to kind of build up their resume. And it does take a very long time. Also, want to highlight that it's not like corporate where you kind of get in and after a month you get the job and you start in 2 weeks. It's more of like a 6 months to a year process. So keep that in mind. And also, there are just so many international organizations too. If you don't want to work for the United States government, so many international organizations that are looking for passionate, well-read young professionals to train and build up to be something great.
I will also just add, I think Nora, you sparked something in my brain. If you are interested in pursuing and you know exactly where you want to work, especially if it's somewhere in the government or a federal agency, I think that you should try to get an internship before you apply. for like a full-time position to see if you like it, to see if you can network. A lot of times people will have a lot easier and shorter time frame of that like 6 months to a year that Nora was talking about if they know people from an internship experience or they get a return offer. And that applies to really public and private. So I would say like make your list of what you are interested in, what jobs you've heard that pique your interest, and see what internships they have during the year and during the summer. For example, like the State Department has summer internships, super competitive. A lot of times, the application might open for a week, it'll close after 2 days because they received a max amount of applications. So sometimes people also encourage you to pursue those opportunities during the semester if you have some free time, just because there are a lot less applicants and typically you have a completely, different experience than if you were to do the summer. So yeah, that would be something also I would add. Just try to do internships when you can. If you feel like you have a light workload a semester, don't be afraid to reach out and apply for some of the part-time jobs too for anywhere that piques your interest.
Thank you all enough for joining us. I hope you don't get off before we get to hear what Chris had to say to join the conversation. After we do that, I'm just going to close out with just inviting you all to explore the Institute for Strategic Policy Solutions, and then we'll sign off and remind our students and members who are interested in international relations that we will continue this ongoing series throughout the year to expose you. So I'm so proud of each of you all. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. And can we cue up Chris?
Often here in the US, we have the position of being a global superpower, both economically, politically, and militarily. But when you're a smaller country like Haiti, in terms of geopolitical power and military power and economic power, or you're in a interesting predicament like an Argentina economically, or a Malawi or Rwanda on the African continent, those are all very different positions, and they each require a unique perspective to be able to, one, approach the topic that you've been assigned for your particular delegation, but also in terms of how do I consider other countries? Because in MUN, there are three things that you need to be able to do well. One is you need to be able to collaborate, good faith collaboration. And this just doesn't go for, the United Nations. This goes for real life. You need to be able to collaborate with your peers and colleagues, whether that's at work, whether that's at home, whether that's in your educational practices. It needs to be good faith. So that's one. Two, you need to be able to communicate well. So communicating well in a written or in an oral fashion, you need to be able to get your point across. You need to be able to do it effectively. And then the third and final thing is you need to be able to not argue over a subject, because that's not the point. When you debate a subject, or what some might call argue, it's not about proving your point right. It's about leaving the debate with a better understanding. And so through that, you'll be able to see the other side's perspective. And I think that really taught me a valuable lesson in my kind of day-to-day activities, because we wouldn't see eye to eye, for example, with my peers on certain position paper topics, the structure that we've written it in. And, we'd hash it out and we'd debate. But at the end of the day, I'd leave with a better understanding of the position paper, a better understanding of the country that I'm representing, better understanding of the topic, and overall the global challenges that we're trying to address. So those are kind of the three things, and a little bit of the day-to-day I did and how they transfer into real life. Because at the end of the day, it's really important to be able to have these takeaways so that you can transfer them into other sectors of life, whether that's your personal or your professional.
Okay, I have one other question for you. This is always my favorite question. What do you love about your job now? And how do you feel like you're impacting others? I know that, you know my journey. When you become a professional, you put all those skills to work and you see the impact of what you do. It's hard to really quantify and say that to others. But hopefully this program will expand the understanding of why the international space is so important, so that people don't just have to limit, and I'm including myself in this, to just this pathway, or this pathway. I love being an attorney, but I like to expose people to so many other career pathways instead of the traditional ones that we see. So if you will answer this last question about why you love your job and how you're impacting others, that will certainly lead us on to our panel.
Indeed. So I think it all goes back to that curiosity that I had when I first joined NMUN. I really love my job because I'm able to explore such a wide variety of subjects that I'm very passionate about, and I'm able to make an impact, make a difference, no matter how small, whether that's with, potentially getting a sanctions designation, whether that is briefing a high-level individual in a particular organization or government entity, whether that is being able to result in the arrest of a particular individual. At the end of the day, I really love my job because I get to help make the world a better place. I get to have the impact that I do be seen, and it's most importantly an environment that is collaborative, full of camaraderie, and it allows me the opportunity to break new horizons, and kind of really reach where no one has ever worked before. And that's kind of the reasons why I really love my job and why I'm passionate about it.